¿Qué onda, Lokos? So, today's Monday again, and you know what that means. Mexican Movie Monday. Today's movie we're going to talk about is called Almacenados, or Warehoused. This movie's kind of interesting because I've been recently reading that book by Dave Graeber called Bullshit Jobs. And as you may guess, me, much like many people in America, work a corporate office job.
What's a bullshit job?
To be honest, I think what I do, you could probably do it in 3 hours, but a week, but I stretch it out.
And it's interesting to see the parallels between this movie and a corporate office job. I'm reminded of a lot of the things that Mark Fisher and David Graeber talk about, which they talk about us transcending from a 40-hour work week to a 20-hour work week due to the fact that we could probably do the same amount of work in 20 hours. Instead, we're just kind of lingering around the workforce for 20 extra hours. But enough about that. The movie itself is actually really cool, right? 10 seconds in, I was immediately intrigued. It sounded exactly like some Darkest Hour. It reminded me of walking to school and listening to like Atreyu or Bleeding Through or like Poison the Well. If you're familiar with any of those bands, you'll know what I'm talking about. But also, it reminded me of Bullshit Jobs. Since I worked this sort of job, I think this guy looked like me on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, just kind of sitting there, just nonchalantly, just looking straight, deadpan into the camera, just dead, right? There's nothing to do. Well, the movie Warehouse is pretty predictable, 10 minutes in, you can kind of guess to see where it's going. But the thing that kept this alive, that kept it afloat, was really the audio, which was amazing.
Señor Lino, hay algo que no entiendo.
Creí que todo estaba claro.
And the directing. Really what saved it for me was the directing. Even though it only had like 2 characters per camera, every single time the camera was set to a sort of center shot, it was just straight looking at them. Even when the camera was set to wide shot and there was 2 characters on the screen, that was even fascinating to see the way they would use color to enhance the image itself, or the kind of portrayal of like teeter-tottering towards one side. You'll see one of the characters, the senior member, Lino, and the other guy just hanging around in this rinky-dinky chair. And I think it's important to note that this film is not like an art house film, or it's not trying to be socially ambiguous. It's not trying to add strong cultural implications and trying to decipher post-structuralism. It's just trying to say that there's these 2 characters and they don't know why they're working at a place, and they feel shut in. And throughout about 80% of the film, 2 characters mainly are custom on the screen, so you have to get used to this sort of idea. And when I go to work and there's beige painted walls and sort of blue backgrounds, I felt the exact same way as seeing the decaying or the rotting of the warehouse within. It's not necessarily the rot, but it's actually the nihilism towards the rot. So it's just like, oh, pass it by, it's no big deal. I think this movie you can't really understand until you see some clips of it, so let's get down to it. Vamos a lo que vamos. The movie Warehoused is pretty much the Mexican version of The Office.
Eso es lo que dice él.
That's what he says.
With repetitive lines,
Estamos o no estamos.
deadpan comedy,
Aquí cada quien vamos a lo que vamos.
and awkward camera angles. It offers a bit of insight into the modern day work life.
No hay que barrer el almacén, por ejemplo.
The movie has 2 main characters, Señor Lino and Nin.
¿Qué clase de nombre es Nin?
It begins with blaring music coming out of Nin's headphones as he goes to work. The movie, of course, begins on a normal workday week, Monday. The first 3 minutes of the movie are dedicated to Nin as he's taking the bus and walking to work. And this sets the mood for the entire movie. There's truly excitement in the mundane if we just look around, I suppose. Señor Lino then gives Nin the ropes about the job and tells him that they must wait for the truck to arrive. The decayed warehouse is a great representation of the old ideas that really need an upgrade. We quickly get the idea that maybe Lino is a bit jealous that Nin will be manager of the warehouse in only 5 days.
Nomás 5 días.
When Tuesday comes, Nin gets in trouble with Lino since he didn't have his smock on prior to clocking in.
Así no.
Sound familiar? It should if you have like a retail job or an office job. The banality of these types of jobs is greatly displayed by this little scene.
Tienes que ponerte la bata antes de checar.
Es que yo creo que se empieza a trabajar cuando se llega al trabajo.
Siempre se ha hecho así. Estamos.
Nin also decides to bring in a chair the second day, so that way he doesn't have to stand. They have a minor discussion about ants and the representation of work.
Ya sé lo que le gusta de las hormigas. Van a lo que van.
And it's almost in your face the way it's pointed out. When Wednesday comes, Nin is getting the hang of it and asks even more questions that we pretty much know the answer to. But he does ask Lino why he doesn't notify headquarters about those 7 extra minutes he's been working every day. Then, more mundaneness alongside Nin telling Lino that he actually was left by his dad. So we start getting the vibe that maybe Nin is just a liar. A truck shows up and they think it's one of theirs, but it's actually one of their competitors. Nin then tells Lino how he almost was happy that it wasn't one of their trucks, because he was feeling kind of lazy. I don't know if it was actually feeling lazy or if he just said that to try to compensate for that sort of pain that he felt at that time, but I think it is interesting to consider the idea of productivity in this realm. If ever was an epitome of a bullshit job, it's the job you see in warehoused. But to be honest, working in an office, there's a lot of these types of positions that are sort of middlemen that don't do anything.
Who let the lemon head into the room? You are a waste of life, and you should give up.
Supervisor of one person, so to speak. Lino then heads out to meet the big boss, and Nin calls in to impersonate a psychiatrist in order to finally get Lino paid for all those hours that he's worked. Thursday comes and Lino has a hangover and chorro because he can't really drink. Nin tells Lino that he called the boss's secretary to ask how often they get mass, to which we finally find out that they have never received any order for mass.
Que venden un chingo de astas para las embajadas gringas, pero ni un solo mástil.
Lino leaves upset. When Friday finally arrives, Lino shows up late and Nin brings in a mast in order to reinvent the hope that Lino felt. At the end, Lino asks Nin if he could stay hanging around the warehouse. There's something to be said about work and meaning of identity here. You know, when you first meet a person, you ask, what do you do? You don't ask, what do you like to do? Or you don't ask, what do you do in your spare time? I think the idea of a materialist society has developed this comprehension of our occupation as identity. And if we get stuck in the idea of nothingness, then we often feel like our identity is nothing. There's a little segment in which Lino talks about ants, and he references the only reason that the ants keep working is to pay for their kids. It's a very old school idea. You know, the idea of just working just based for family, but it's also essential to understanding a sort of nationalist idealism that you're seeing different countries emerge from.
What I am, I'm a nationalist.
운동.
초국가속의 운동.
민족을 도움이 되죠.
This Prime Minister hails from the RSS, a hardline Hindu nationalist organisation and the ideological backbone of his ruling BJP party.
Quote, under the previous government, immigration was far too high and the system was badly out of control. Net migration needs to come down radically.
This movie has so much space throughout the film of silence, of sort of deadpan comedy. It has so much room for you to understand the meaning of the images that are on the screen. And the idea that Lino couldn't leave or that he felt like he should be just doing the same thing every day is not necessarily the fact that he's old, but is due to the fact that his occupation became his identity. He even states how he stood around for 11 years, finally getting a chair after the 11th year. I think there was an awakening of sort of skepticism, and that same skepticism allowed for extra innovative growth. So just even the idea of bringing in a chair could have been derived from the possibility that now we're more connected than ever, and we give each other ideas of finding shorter ways of doing things. It may be a simple-minded movie, but I don't think it's unnecessary to talk about them. I think it's rather important that we do talk about people who go to work and do nothing. I think there's a lot of people who go to work and can do that same job in 15 to 20 hours. They just sit there for 20 to 25 hours. You know, it's crazy to see how interesting a movie this mundane really is. From the silence and the passivity of the scenes, you quickly feel immersed into their boring lives. I do like how the old man Lino says that he makes 3,880 pesos per month. That's roughly like $400. That ain't much. You know, I like how often the old man says like, "Estamos? Got it?" Because that is such an essential Mexican thing to kind of be referencing you know, their dominance as the older of the individual. So asking for respect out of being old, right? It's just a necessary thing. And I also like how he keeps complaining about how much work they got. You know, es tarde, it's late already. Vamos a lo que vamos. Like, let's get down to it. Quit wasting time. I'm not so sure why I was laughing throughout most of the movie. Maybe it's the realistic implications of a corporate life into this warehoused idea. Or maybe it's the fact that I kind of feel warehoused with the corporate environment that's kind of like a beige background like this, or like a baby blue background. Kind of drives you insane. But yeah. You know, one of the things that did bother me about this movie, though, was like the irrational implications of the people. So why they never brought a book, or why they never brought a radio into their work. Maybe it was like that part that kind of symbolized more, where the old man keeps rotating the cog, or the lock, the nut, into the bolt over and over and over. That's kind of symbolic of doing the same thing and not getting anywhere. Deliberately knowing that, you know, you're not doing anything. It's kind of like when he was referencing about the ants, and he starts talking about how they do the same thing over and over. They follow the same patterns every day. And the new guy, Neen, you know, he comes in with his innovative ideas right away. The idea of using a chair, the idea of like moving the ants out of the way by stepping on them, making them take a new path. The idea of asking for the money back. You could claim that, you know, because I think oftentimes with films like this, you want to display the idea of generation gaps. So millennials versus boomers. And I don't think that was the case. I think the case here was more in reference to employment and the idea of work when there's no work. The fact remains is that our societies are moving towards a new technological future, and the ways of the warehouse are kind of diminishing. So like, that's the same thing with factories in America. That's why everybody was freaking out and the nationalist idea grew. But enough on that subject. I think this movie is a great symbolic statement of the mentality of workers nowadays. You know, stuck in a rut, doing the same thing, coming to work, not doing anything. It was a great, small, passive, symbolic statement of modern workforce society. So if you get a chance to, definitely watch Warehoused. I highly recommend it. Well, don't highly, you know. I just recommend it. It's definitely not the best movie I've seen when it comes to these terms or these ideas, but it had some very, very good directing, and I did enjoy the stillness of the whole situations. I did enjoy their characters. The character studies of the two, Neen and Lino, was really cool. Give it a chance. You know, it's on Netflix. So, in Donald Trump's famous words,
What the hell do you have to lose?
and I'm Mexican Chewy, and hasta mañana, locos.
I had noticed over the years that you keep meeting people who are embarrassed by what they do. I don't really do anything.